Yes, we do have Georgia on our minds as we continue my 2014 college previews. And Mark Richt entering another season as head coach for the Georgia Bulldogs knows that this team has the capability of doing a lot of special things with the amount of talent on both sides of the ball that he'll have back. Ground game should be very good for Georgia. Todd Gurley, one of the best running backs in the country, averages 6 yards per carry entering this season and had another 1,000-yard year, despite the fact that due to injury midway through the season, he missed 3 games. How valuable was Gurley? Of those 3 games that he missed, Georgia lost 2 of them. So you got to have him out there, and he looks healthy now. And we'll see how the health of his backup Keith Marshall fares. Marshall had the torn ACL, devastating injury in 2013. But if he can go, that gives you that valuable 1-2 punch that you have in the backfield. And recruiting-wise, Mike Bobo, the offensive coordinator, and Mark Richt, the head coach, another solid recruiting class for them. I think a top 6, top 8 recruiting class in the country, and they add a couple of pieces to the backfield, and that could very well add that depth that Georgia's really, really needs and will have this year. Receiving-wise, boy, they're going to be loaded in this area. Chris Conley returns. He's the leading returning receiver for the Dogs. You have Mike Bennett back, and we'll see about the health of Justin Scott Wesley. Was injured entering this season. And speaking of injury, of course, the biggest news of all is Malcolm Mitchell, who I think is the most talented of the receivers, but recently had surgery. Mark Richt is not saying anything at all, at least that we need to hear about the status of Mitchell entering the season opener, which is a big one as you're hosting Clemson. No word if Mitchell's going to be ready to go. Hutson Mason, new quarterback for Georgia, and at least he'll have some valuable weapons returning to throw to. Mason, he is a fifth-year senior, and it's weird for Georgia because, every year this decade we've had Aaron Murray as quarterback. As far as stats, Murray was a decorated leader. As far as winning big games, Aaron Murray was not known for that. Mason now has the opportunity to do so with the amount of talent back for UGA. Mason played the last 2 games of 2013 because Murray got hurt against Georgia Tech. Mason was just okay, and Georgia won. Showed inconsistency against Nebraska. Georgia wasn't so lucky in the Gator Bowl against the Huskers, and they lost to Big Red, Nebraska. So Mason, 61% completion percentage a year ago, 5 TDs, 3 interceptions. We'll see if that completion percentage rises. And Mason has to realize the most important thing, he doesn't have to be like Aaron Murray and throw for over 300 yards per game. He's got a terrific backfield. In fact, don't be surprised if this Georgia team is more balanced or, if anything, favors the running game slightly over the passing game. If that ground game gets going, they can eat up time off the clock, and that means that your defense, which returns the majority of starters anyway, but was vulnerable at times last year, you don't have to rely on them as much. It could be a team that defensively is fresher and an offense that could just wear the opposing defense down. Offensive line-wise, at least 5 guys who saw valuable playing time a year ago returns, including 2 full-time starters, David Andrews at the center, John Theus at tackle. And watch out for the tight end. Georgia's high on this guy. That is Jay Rome. Defensively for the Bulldogs, majority of starters return, including a talented linebacking core, which we'll talk about in a second. But one huge addition to this defense, that is Jeremy Pruitt, defensive coordinator from Florida State last year. Before that, previous 2 years, defensive back coach for Alabama. That's right. Jeremy Pruitt has been a part of the last 3 national championship teams as far as an assistant coach goes. Pruitt knows defense, and he knows, the element of forcing turnovers, which Georgia forced very few last year compared to the rest of the country. Florida State was a takeaway machine, and Pruitt hopes that that can transfer to the Bulldogs. Tom Grantham, by the way, the former defensive coordinator for Georgia, now at Louisville. So Pruitt specializes in defensive backs, and this is the one area that I think will determine if Georgia can get in that 14 playoff or if they're just going to be an 8 or 9 win team. Won't be easy because 2 of your safeties you were counting on are not a part of the team anymore. Josh Harvey-Clemens kicked off the team, and Trey Matthews, he transferred, but also 2, cornerback Shaq Williams transferred as well. So the lone full-time returning starter, he's a good one, though, as a corner, and that is Damian Swan. So the safeties, who will occupy this very important position. Corey Moore at one spot and Tremel Terry at the other. So those guys, Terry and Moore, have a major responsibility. Defensive line-wise, Ray Drew, Jody Johnson, they should help as far as the defensive ends goes. The tackles, that's going to be a pretty green area for Georgia. And last year, the Bulldogs actually did fairly well against the run. As a matter of fact, last season, the defensive line in general did their part. This defense had 33 sacks a year ago. That's a pretty good number. Linebacking core, this is a big reason why I think Georgia will show a lot of improvement because you get them all back. And that includes one of the best in the country in Ramik Wilson. You're going to hear this guy's name mentioned quite a bit. Wilson, he'll play on the next level, as will Jordan Jenkins. And you also add Leonard Floyd and Amarlo Herrera. Yeah, Georgia played some 3-4 defense last year. You'll see it again this year, but I think with Pruitt, they're going to show multiple looks. So I think that'll make Georgia's defense even harder for opposing offenses to try to figure out. They will show multiple formations. Kicking-wise for Georgia, solid in this area with Marshall Morgan back, 22 of 24 on field goals last season. So he's valuable. Punting last season was really what you would call erratic. They were inconsistent in that area. And the return game, punt return game, punt kick return game were inconsistent last year. As a matter of fact, it was pretty much non-existent. They only averaged 2 yards per punt return and less than 20 yards per kick return. That's bad. But Isaiah McKenzie should help out. He's a speedster, and I think that his addition should solve that issue. Schedule-wise for Georgia, you open up with a bang at home against Clemson last season at Death Valley. This was a high-scoring game with Taj Boyd and Watkins outlasting Georgia, but those two guys are gone now. Of course, the status of Malcolm Mitchell could be vital in that game for Georgia. Still should be a good game, and Georgia should be a slight favorite at Athens in the return game from last year's game in which, again, Clemson edged out Georgia. 2 weeks to prepare for South Carolina. The following game, you get a bye week, and second Saturday of September, the Gamecocks at Columbia should be the game of the year in the SEC East. South Carolina's won 3 of the last 4 in that rivalry, but Georgia did win last year. And then after that, the schedule eases up immensely for the Bulldogs. Although you can't overlook Missouri, the defending East champions. That's at Columbia, Missouri on October 11th. Of course, Florida, the cocktail party, November 1st. And then November 15th, the next major game as far as competition, hosting Auburn. I remember last year's game was a classic, the Immaculate Deception. The 4th and 18 play with under a minute to go that Auburn was able to score in a big way on the long pass play off a Georgia deflection. That game, so Georgia is still scratching their heads about, but you get a rematch with the Tigers and Nick Marshall. That game this time, though, is in Athens. And then you close out the year at home. Georgia gets a lot of home games to close out the year with, and you're hosting your rival from Atlanta. That's Georgia Tech. It should be a win. Best case scenario for Georgia, no reason why they can't win every single game on the schedule. With the ground game as loaded as this, with a receiving core as loaded as what they have, and with a linebacking core as good as what Georgia has, and the addition of Jeremy Pruitt as your defensive coordinator, this really, really aids a big area for Georgia. They should have the knowledge, they should have the wisdom under Pruitt to play better and force more turnovers. Those first 2 games are tough, but remember the teams that they're playing against. Clemson, they've got a lot of vacancies, to try to fill. And remember, South Carolina, they're going to be tough too, but they will certainly have some areas to work on as well between their opener and the game against Georgia. Who knows how that game will turn out, but Georgia could win every single game. They're that talented, and again, the addition of Pruitt helps. Worst case scenario, it could be an 8-4 campaign for this team, primarily if the injury bug were to return, especially in that backfield for UGA, and also if the defensive backfield has its struggles with the inexperience at safeties. If they haven't quite grasped Pruitt's concept in time, Georgia, it could almost be like last year all over again. And likely scenario, I do think Georgia will have a double-digit winning season. I do think they're that good, and I do think that defensively they'll be that much better. So I've got them going 11-1. Their only loss, I think that game at South Carolina will be the one that gets them. Winning at Columbia, South Carolina is an absolute monster, and I think early in the year that's going to be tough for Georgia to do. So I think South Carolina will win the East. Georgia in second place at 11-1, though, as far as the college football playoff, may not be sitting in as bad a shape as you might think, depending on how the rest of the country fares in their conferences. Georgia could be giving heavy consideration for a college football 14 playoff spot. Could happen. SEC is the best conference in the country, and it's not a realm of possibility that the SEC couldn't get 2 teams in there, and 11-1. Georgia, it'll be close to see if they get into the playoff. But again, it'll depend on how the rest of the country fares as well. That will conclude for Georgia. They should have a pretty nice season. Thanks for watching.